Hello, and welcome to Tea Talk, where the topics are real, relevant, and relaxing. It's Tea Talk time, and here's Lady O.
Thank you, Tracy. Well, hello there, and welcome to Tea Talk. It's Lady O, and I'm excited to see you today. And I have a wonderful, wonderful show today, and I'm so excited about it. Many of you that know me know I love history, and we have had some wonderful documentaries and movies that have come out here recently that just really have me mesmerized because each time I learn a little bit more about my history, the American history, Black history. And I'm hoping, though, that at the end of this show, you will too have a longing to get to know more about who you are, how you came to be who you are. Because if we're going to go and be progressive in the next couple of years, which we have a lot of things coming up here that can take us back, but if we're going to progress, we got to know where we've come from. We've got to understand the whys and the what's of what's going on right now so that we will know what to do. So listen, I'd like for you to grab your tea. I have my teacup today with my dad's picture on it. And get your social media fingers together. Go ahead and get on your Facebook page and start sharing that Lady O is on. And she is going to be talking about history. And I have a very, very, very special guest. Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson is going to be my guest. And she is phenomenal. If you've ever seen her before, you know what I'm talking about. And if you have not, you are in for a treat. So listen, I'm going to read her little bio here. She has an extensive bio, but I'm going to read a little portion of it so you get to know who you're going to be listening to. And while I'm doing this, go ahead and share. Go ahead and invite some other people, your friends. Now, this show is going to be really good for young people. When I watched this documentary first, I watched it with my granddaughter because I want to make sure that they have that too. It is stamped from the beginning. It's the name of it, Stamped from the Beginning. It is a documentary on Netflix. If you have not watched it after this, I know you're going to watch it. And listen, I've watched it 3 times. That's just how good it is. And some other people I've talked to have done the same thing because there's so much, it's so rich that you just can't get it all with that first bite. You've got to go back and see what you missed so you can really get it ingrained. And it's so true to the things that I have been studying for years. It gives me some missing pieces there. So we want to make sure that we go ahead and share with some friends. Call somebody up on the phone. Say, girl, you need to get on now. Get your grandchildren on here. Get your family and friends. And because it's about to go down. Let me just read to you real quickly because we want to get into the meat of what we have to share today. And like I said, it's so much. But I'm going to read to you this because I don't want to miss anything. It's so much, and I don't want to forget. So I'm going to read it. So please forgive me for reading it. But I do know this young lady, but I want to read it because she is so phenomenal in everything she has done. I want to give her her credit and her due. But Kelly Carter Jackson is the Michael and Denise 68 Associate Professor in the Department of Africana Studies and the Chair of Africana Studies at Wesley College. She is the author of the award-winning book, Force and Freedom, Black Abolitionists and the Politics of Violence. Her book won the James Broussard Best First Book Prize and was a finalist for the Frederick Douglass Book Prize, the Museum of African American History Stone Booker Prize, and listed among 13 books to read on African American history by the Washington Post. Her essays have been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, and the Boston Globe. She has also been featured on host interviews or documentaries for Netflix, which is why we're having this show today because of the Netflix and Stamped from the Beginning. She's been on MSNBC, PBS, CNN, Good Morning America, CBS Morning, MSNBC, as I said, and Apple TV. She is the host and executive producer of you get a podcast, a podcast on Oprah, and co host of the Radiotopia podcast, This Day in Esoteric Political History. Carter Jackson serves as a historian in residence for the Museum of African American History in Boston, which is where she lives with her beautiful family, and is commissioner for the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Her next book, which we are so excited, we just cannot wait, is going to be out in this summer. In June, we're looking for it around spring or June of 2024, and it will be called We Refuse, a forceful history of Black resistance. So we know that's going to be amazing. But she has so much inside her, her mind, and her experiences are so vast that I want you to help me welcome her so we can dive into that and find out more about what she has experienced and what she can help us to understand about Black history and American history. Would you help me welcome Tea Talk, Miss Kelly, Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson, to Tea Talk? Welcome, Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson.
Hi, how are you?
We're so happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. This is always a good time, but it's always a gift for me to be able to be back in my home church in Houston, Texas. It's great.
Yes, yes. She is from Houston, Texas, Cy-Fair, at First Metropolitan Church. We know her and watched her grow up, and it's just amazing to see what you have encountered over these years. They're just passing, but I just love it because you've always been a sponge. You just soak up so much, and I'm happy because now you can give it that back to me, the things that I soak up or didn't soak up. But I'm just excited about that. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit. I read your some things about you, but let's talk about you. I know you're a mommy and a wife. Tell us about your family.
Sure. So my husband is Nathaniel. We've been married for 18 years now, which is just crazy to me. 19 years this in 2024. We have 3 beautiful free children: William, who is 9, Jojo, who is 6, and Coco, who is 3. They give us so much life. They make us tired, but they give us so much life. We're so grateful for them. And we live in the suburbs of Boston. We're just right outside. I'm a professor at Wellesley College. I'm actually the chair of the Africana Studies department, and I've been at Wellesley for maybe 7 years now. And it's just been so good and so wonderful. And because I'm a historian and because I'm in Africana Studies, there are always opportunities for me to do a lot of public facing work. So I write op-eds, I write books. I do a lot of podcasting. I love podcasts. Just like this one. I love doing stuff like this. And then, I do a lot of documentaries and I do a lot of interviews. And that's what you saw in Stamped from the beginning.
Wow. Well, we are so proud of you in Houston. We just, call you our own, and to see how far you've gone, and to know that, we all started here and then here you're out here. We're just so proud of you and pray God's blessings upon you. And the thing that I wanted her to just share, that she is a family woman. She's a child of God and she loves the Lord. Her family is very strong down here in Houston, loving the Lord and having that model with her parents, who will be married for 50 years. Bill and Arvella Carter, Dr. Carter, who, they are just wonderful people to model for family and for marriage. So I wanted to honor them because you have come from them. You are the product. So we give hats off to them. But I wanted to say that because in the midst of you doing all that you have done, you have children. You stop to have your children, to get married, to do things. And a lot of times people who are very popular they get so consumed with the work that they don't enjoy the life. They don't have the children. They don't have the marriage. They don't have the relationships with people back down home in Houston and that kind of thing. And you managed to do all that. How do you do that?
I don't know. I have a clone and she shows up in different places. No, I don't. No, I think I got it from my mom. I saw my mom is, mother of 7 children, and I saw how she multitasked, how she wore 10 different hats and wore each hat very well. And I'll admit there are some times where I may be giving, 60% of parenting and 30% at work and another 40% of my marriage. Not everybody is getting equal parts, but I try to give everyone the best of me when they get it. And I try to always take it back to my roots. Like, it's so important for me when I go home to Houston that I am home. I'm home. Like, Massachusetts is where I live, but I consider like Texas my home. That's where all my sisters are. That's where my parents are, my families, my friends. And so it's always good to be rooted, I think, because that's what keeps you connected. And it keeps you grounded.
Right. You just said something. I'm gonna have to say that, so I want them to put this in the little chat thing. You said, because this is good for me too, because I'm a busy woman, and I know your mom and I are good friends, and so I know how she does, and we do some things together too, and have done it forever. And I think our kids are kind of like, wow, we had to have parents like this, so we got to kind of keep up and fill these shoes. But you said something, and you can make sure you quote me, make sure I'm quoting you right. But heard you say that when I am with them, I give them the best of me during that time. So even though you may have 30%, it's the best of
it's the best 30% I can give you.
And I think that's good because, just make sure it's focused, that it's good. It's not just
because we can't be 100% all the time and give 100. That's just not possible. And so my goal is to always, because I try to stay grounded to people who will be honest with me. I check in with my kids, I check in with my husband a lot. Hey, we've been really busy. Let's take a date. Hey, let's spend time with the kids. Let me go for a walk. I need time for myself. I think those things are really important, where you check in with yourself every so often to make sure that you are not just replenishing yourself, but replenishing others.
Exactly. You keep yourself grounded and your family's grounded, and so it all works. Because nobody 100%. You got too much. God is giving you too much. You just can't give it all in one pot.
So, no, you can't.
That's the other thing too, being true to what God has called you and gifted you to, because the word says, to whom much is given, much is required. And it's not just talking about money, it's talking about intellect, it's talking about abilities, all those kind of things that because as I talk with women, being a pastor's wife for 38 years, and they're saying, how did you juggle all of that? And I say, God graces you for his assignment of you. So when he gives you an assignment, you can't just say, oh, I can only do one thing, God. He said, no, I have graced you and gifted you for multiple assignments. Everybody doesn't have that, because everybody doesn't have that assignment. So do the assignment and I will be with you. So with that said, I want to get into this. How in the world did you, I know you do documentaries, but I came upon this, who told me? I think, you know what? My daughter-in-law sent this to me and to us as a family. We kind of share different documentaries that you got to watch this, got to watch that. And she said, y'all got to watch Stamp from the Beginning. I'm like, Stamp from the Beginning? What is a stamp from? It didn't sound too like I wanted to go watch it. So I was sitting here one day with my granddaughter, and I always like to give them some good things to watch. And it's looked like a documentary. So let's watch a documentary. So we watched that together, and we sat there the whole time, she and I both, with our eyes bucked, our mouths open, and just kind of grabbing our heart. And after I got through with it, I watched it again. I watched it 3 times because it was so good. So that kind of gives you the gist of how it impacted me. So how did you get involved in this particular documentary? Tell me a little bit about that.
This is wild. So Ibram is a colleague and a friend. He wrote the book Stamped from the Beginning several years ago now. And during the course of 2020, when there was the racial reckoning and all of this stuff was happening politically and socially throughout the summer, his career also really exploded. And so he wrote a lot of books, how to be an anti-racist. He's written a lot of children's books. And he was approached to do, to make a documentary of his book or based on his book. And so one of the things that the production company did that I think was really cool was they said, okay, we're not just going to interview Ibram. We're going to interview all these Black scholars, all these Black activists. But I think what's special about Stamped is that it's all Black women scholars and all Black women activists. And so when I got interviewed or asked to interview for this, documentary, I was a little shocked. And then I was like, okay, all right, let's go. I know that this is my expertise and I can talk about this. And so they flew me down to New York City, and we went to almost like a warehouse is where they sort of filmed it in. And it was really cool. I was there for several hours. They ask you questions over and over and over again. It's kind of intense because, you can take breaks, but the point is to get as much information in as possible. And they interviewed dozens of people. So how they copied and pasted all these hours, I'm sure there were hundreds of hours of interviews that they, edited down to about an hour and 45 minutes. That to me is a feat in and of itself, but it's really well done and I'm very proud of it. And I actually shot for this about 2 years ago. So, in the world of Hollywood, you do things and you sort of forget about them. And so they told me when we wrapped, they said, this was 2021. I said, when will this be out? Because I knew it wasn't going to be out in a couple months. And they're like, oh, 2024. I was like, 2024. And so, but they said the beginning of 2024. But then, of course, there were writers' strikes and all kinds of strikes going on. And so, so now it's finally been released and making its debut, and it's got rave reviews, and I'm really excited about it.
Oh, wow. That's a good, because I wondered how that all went. So they just kind of went in the warehouse and a whole day to get everything they could get out of you, and then took it back to their place and start cutting and pasting and putting and figuring out. So did you know you were selected, or were you going to be one of many that might have been selected?
I knew I was going to be in it. I only knew about a couple of other people. I knew Elizabeth Hinton was in it. I knew that Ruha Benjamin was in it, Carol Anderson. It's a small world of Black women historians. We're all friends. Yeah. We all sort of know each other. There was only maybe 3 or 4 people that I didn't know. I knew their names, but don't know them personally. And so we had sort of all texted each other, hey, were you in this? Oh, were you in this? Oh, yeah, I got asked to be in this. So, but I did not realize that I would be in it as much as I was. So,
you were good. They had a lot.
It was a lot. I was a little shocked by that. I was like, okay, because
so good.
Thank you. You can talk for 3 hours and then they use 30 seconds, they might not even use much at all. So my expectations are always low when I do this. I don't expect to be, seen, but I was really grateful that that they could use a lot of the stuff that I had said.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Let me just start with my very first part that I want you to talk about. And because I think, to me, everybody and all of my team on here, they all watched it and they have parts that they are very, it impacted them on. But the part that started out with me from the very beginning, I didn't know, or I didn't realize, studying Black history all these years, about how they came to the indentured servants, which were white, and the slaves were kind of on the same level, and they got together to form a rebellion against their white slave masters. Can you talk about that? Because you can explain it a lot better than I can, but
I sure can. When you think about the creation of the United States, initially, white settlers, Europeans, had attempted to use Native Americans as their servants, as their slaves. That did not work out too well because the Native Americans were native to America and they knew how to bypass a lot of that. And so their backup plan was to use white indentured servants, sometimes people who were debtors, prisoners, who would come and work a certain amount of years and work the land. And then they eventually made their way to Africa and started using African slaves as well. Their survival rates were a lot higher, and in some ways it was cheaper. And of course, because of their Black skin, they're easier to identify. What happens though in the 16th century and in the 17th century is that race as an idea has not quite become fully formed. It hasn't congealed yet. It's still kind of slippery. And so because of that, there are these alliances that can be made with Black enslaved people and white indentured servants who understood the power of class and power and how the elite were pretty much exploiting all of them.
Mhm.
And because they didn't want to be exploited anymore, because they wanted their own land, and in a lot of cases their freedom, they started to form these alliances and push back together. And there are a lot of these alliances that took place all throughout the 17th century. But Bacon's Rebellion is one of the biggest and probably one of the most crucial. And so what the elite do in response is to say, we can't have these rebellions popping off. We cannot have Black-white solidarity because the elite are just a small few, and we will get overwhelmed very easily by enslaved Black people and by white indentured servants. So let's give them something that will keep them off our backs. Let's divide and conquer. And the way they did that was they used race. And they basically said, to be a slave is to be Black, and to be Black is to be a slave. Because a lot of enslaved people could get their freedom. They could buy and purchase other slaves. They could buy land. There was a lot of flexibility before you get these rigid laws. And a lot of these laws are a result of these rebellions. How do we keep these rebellions down? Let's change the law. So now if you're Black, you're a slave and you're a slave forever. And if you're white, we'll give you some land. We'll give you not power, not real power, but we'll give you more power than Black people have. We'll make you feel superior. And then you can keep those Black people in line for us. Matter of fact, we got a great job for you as a slave catcher. That's what you do. So by giving them that power,
Right.
it shut down all those alliances.
Right. And you said, so I want to go back to one little piece you said, because one of them was one of the things that really got me in here. They were saying, I said, how did this racial issue come about? And it came about because white people wanted to be able to identify who the enemy was against them. So when the servants and the slaves were together, it was Black and whites together, but they were united to fight the white people, the slave masters.
Yes, the elites, those in power.
Yeah.
And not only did they change the law to shut down those rebellions, but English common law said that everything goes through the father. Land, wealth, inheritance, everything is through the father. But they changed the laws to say, no, when it comes to slavery, everything goes through the mother. So if the mother was enslaved, the children are enslaved. That's how you determine who a slave is. Who is their mother? So of course, if you're a Black woman and you have a child, your children are automatically enslaved. Because it's mama's baby, daddy's maybe. You know, they didn't have you are the father. They didn't have those DNA tests back then. And so by ensuring that these, classes of people were kept captive based on who their mother was they flipped it. And they did that to protect patriarchy, to protect white men. You're not culpable. You're not responsible for taking care of these children. These are slaves. These aren't even children. These are slaves. So, and if you're a slaveholder and you want as many slaves as possible, you sexually assault these women, you get them to have 10, 15, 20 children you didn't have to pay for, slaves you don't have to pay for. And that is how slavery worked.
Yeah, and they'd be slaves for life from the mother.
And they would be slaves for life. They would be slaves. Now, they might even be your children, but they were entitled to nothing because they were enslaved. So you had a lot of instances in which enslaved children are walking around with red hair, looking just like their white fathers, but they're guaranteed nothing because everything went through the mother.
Was a slave. As long as your mother's a slave, I don't care how white you are, you're a slave as well. And the white man does not have any responsibility for giving you, because the land stuff went through the father.
Yes. So women could not inherit land. White women could not inherit land, but white women could inherit slaves. So white women's property was not in land, it was in slaveholding. So Martha Washington, for example, owned over 200 slaves. George Washington didn't have a lot of money. He married up. And he married up because he knew, well, she doesn't have a lot of land. I've got the land, but she has over 200 slaves. And so that is how a lot of people coupled their power together. Men had the land, women had the slaves.
Right. You know what? And that just makes so much sense with some of the other movies and documentaries that I've seen, because there was one before where this girl was black, mulatto like, but she had land. And so the white people were trying to marry these white guys to her because of her land, and she couldn't own it as a woman, but her father. Anyway, this is crazy. But even
it's wild.
My grandmother owned a lot of land, and my grandfather, when I was saying to my uncle one time about my grandfather's land, and he said it was my grandmother's land. It was, wasn't his land. So, I'm like trying to make sense of what is he talking about? It's making sense now. Well, Tracy had another part at the beginning too that she wanted to talk. Tracy, you said you had a part at the beginning of the documentary that you wanted to talk to Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson about.
Yeah, what a phenomenal documentary. I mean, it started out with a interesting question: what's wrong with Black folks? What's wrong with Black people? And I was like, did I just hear what I thought I just heard? So, yeah, and it made me think about, if we believe the narrative of something being wrong with us, it takes away our humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that caught me at the beginning, and I thought, wow, that's why they think it's okay to do what they do.
Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah,
that's a question. What's wrong with Black people is a question that is so problematic because it assumes something is inherently wrong with you. So explain yourself, right? And I think Black people have spent far too much time explaining their humanity, explaining the fact that they are human beings, explaining their existence. And so it kind of pushes back on the ridiculousness of that question, but it also gets at the deficit thinking in that question, which is, if you start a conversation with what's wrong with you, then that means I automatically think that something is problematic and that I don't have to explain myself, but you have to explain yourself, and you have to prove to me why you are worthy or deserving or eligible for freedom. Right. And that's how we've treated a lot of Black people. I mean, we do this in K through 12 education. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with language? Why can't you sit still? Why can't you just, do what I told you? Why can't you just, why can't you just pull up your pants? Why can't you just get married? We create all of these standards that make Black people deficient, or somehow behind. We say it's a part of your culture. This was all in the 1970s, the Moynihan Report, this culture of poverty. All of that is a myth. All of that is a lie. White people have the same rates of, singleness, the same rates of criminal behavior, the same rates of everything, if not more, because there's more of them in this country. Right. But we don't talk about white people as a problem.
Exactly. Right. And the mere question that says it constitutes an answer, that there's got to be this question here, that there is something wrong. So tell me what's wrong. It puts to me, it made me, because all of the women that were on the documentary were asked that same question. And so you got to hear it, as Tracy was trying to say, over and over and over, people saying what's wrong with Black people, and insinuating that there is an answer for this. But it does something to your psyche. I think, would you say, Tracy, you just kind of felt like, what do you mean? What's wrong with Black people?
Yeah. And I think the other part of it went into the sexuality of Black women. But there's another part that I just remember that it made you kind of just sit there and go back in time. It talked about Phyllis Wheatley. Yeah. Here it is, this intelligent woman who published this beautiful poetry, but instead of embracing it, I'm going to put you on a panel and question you.
Yes.
And
because you can't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is, there can only be something wrong with you. So if there's something exceptional about you, well, then how is that possible? You can't possibly be smart. You couldn't have possibly wrote this. You couldn't possibly have done this thing. So oftentimes, I mean, it sounds so bad because I know that we like to use the phrase a lot of, like, Black girl magic. It's become popular. Everyone loves to use it. But it's never sat well with me because I've always been like, we are not magic, okay? Our talents, like the gifts that we have, is not magic. It is who who we are, right? Like it is not supernatural. We don't like, catch bullets with our hand, like that's not how this works.
Yeah.
But I get the sentiment behind it. The
Yeah, I
sentiment is to
know.
say that you are special, you are wonderful. But I think sometimes it can reinforce ideas that when you are doing something that is good, it's not because you're a human being, it's because you have magic.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me say this real quickly, jump in here because I gotta say it before I say my thought, because it has nothing to do with this, but it does. All the pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together. There was a Black Awards show on last week. And the lady who invented the cure for COVID is
Oh
Black.
wow.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so they had her on there, and she, in her statement, she made, I'm gonna have to ask what the name of those awards, because I didn't write it down because I
Was
wasn't
it
gonna.
Black Girls Rock?
No. Baby, what was the name? Excuse me. What was the name of that Black Award show the other night? Look it up for me because I had never heard of it before.
The Griot Award.
The Griot. The
Oh, the
Griot.
Griot Awards. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
The Griot Award.
On NBC, NSB.
GRIO.
GRIO. Okay, yeah. The Griot Awards. Y'all look that up. But anyway, that was so powerful because what it said to me was, you all won't give us the awards that we're deserving of. So we'll create our own show and we'll do it ourselves and we'll do it right. But anyway, she was saying on there, or either was she or another person on there, but what really, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again. But she said, we are born to be chemists. We are born to be presidents. We are born to be this. We're born with it in us. And so to come with Phyllis Sweetly and say, okay, all this great poetry, surely this couldn't have come from a person like you. But she was born poetry, we're born with so many wonderful things. And she said, I am a scientist. I was born a scientist. And it went over me because if she was born a slave, she would still be born a scientist, but she would not have the opportunities to be able to do that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I love it. Think about how many of our grandmothers or great grandmothers concocted some roux, some sort of remedy from plants and herbs, and it worked, right? Like I'm not talking about like some snake oil. I mean like real concoctions that worked because they had to survive, and that's all that they had. And I think about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman's a botanist. She knew how to use plants. She knew how to chart the stars. These are things that are not just, again, magic. These are skills and talents that Black women are born with. We
are human beings. We are born with gifts and talents, just like you are born to run a company to mow grass and lawns. That's okay. I was born to be a scientist, because so they compartmentalize where you fit in this to be born in, but you cannot be born to be someone who, and they haven't really talked a lot about it, who could have the cure for COVID. And so another one on there too, that was she said the other cure that I didn't really hear a lot about was it smallpox? Wait a minute, let me get it right. I think it was smallpox that was killing the world back in the day, the vaccine for polio, something like that. So go look at it and find it out. But those are things we don't highlight. And even, with Hidden Figures, y'all remember how it wasn't until just here recently that they decided to reveal the fact that those ladies were the ones that had the cure, these human computers. Okay, let's get back, but I'm just giving you some things. I love history and I love to spread this.
Yeah, so do I.
So let's go to the next part. Okay. The thing that was really another part that really got to me was the fact, and I've seen this too, because we travel a lot and I always go to history and try to figure out some pieces of it about the laws. After, the slaves and so forth became, quote unquote, I guess, free or whatever, but the, right after the, what was it called? We did
Reconstruction.
Thank you. Words. Tell me about the Reconstruction and the laws and how many people that were Black that were in power at that time, and how did it go down to hardly nothing and struggling to
in a short amount of time. So after the Civil War ends and Lincoln is assassinated, there is a short period of about 11 years, which we call Reconstruction, where the
Yes.
country is trying to reconstruct itself again to bring the South back into the Union. And during that period, you get a lot of constitutional amendments that get added. First is the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery. The 14th Amendment, which says Black people and people born here are citizens. The 15th Amendment, which establishes voting rights for Black men.
That's
And when
right.
Black men get the right to vote, they do more than just vote. They run for political office. During Reconstruction, there are over 1,500 Black elected officials. 1,500, from U.S. senators to like your local municipal officials. So Black people did not have power, but they had influence, right? So if you looked at South Carolina, for example, they had like 125 delegates that represented South Carolina, and 60 of them would be Black. And a good portion of these Black men were former slaves. And to me, you know, it's just gobsmacking because there's slavery all in the Atlantic world. There's slavery in Brazil and Cuba and Jamaica, everywhere. And aside from Haiti, the United States is the only country where you have within one generation, within half a generation, several years, enslaved people becoming elected officials, formerly enslaved people becoming U.S. senators and representatives of the House.
Right.
You just don't have that. It was warp speed change. Not in a couple years. Yeah, I mean, warp speed change. And that kind of whiplash was like so much. White people could not handle the kind of changes that Black people were making. And the thing about it was Black people just weren't making change for themselves. They were making it for everyone. So out of Reconstruction, that's how you get your first public schools. Public school is mandated during Reconstruction. Your first public health departments, you think about COVID, you think about smallpox, like public health departments came out of Reconstruction. We said all these people are dying not from bullets, but from diseases. Let's have a public health department. That's Reconstruction. When you think about all of these civil rights laws that said that Black people could sit on a streetcar or go to a hotel or go to a restaurant and not be kicked out, like that change all came in Reconstruction. And when Reconstruction ends, Black elected officials basically are kicked out of Washington, D.C. Their positions are overtaken by white supremacists. There are riots in every single major and minor city across the country, and riots to really destroy Black communities, to destroy Black businesses and homes.
To burn them down.
Burn them down. And a lot of the places that they're destroying are not just Black churches and homes, but they are taking the land back from Black landowners. They weren't just like robbing, you know, you're a drunkard or a bum on the street. They knew who had wealth, who had resources, and the person they lynched was almost always a landowner. It was someone that had something that they could take.
They could take.
Yeah.
And they would take. And I want to pause there too, because I believe it's in this documentary too, where it just brought me to tears to see people who were landowners and doctors and so forth get a letter or on the door saying, be out by sundown tomorrow night or your house will burn down and your family inside it. And to see those people load up everything they own on wagons and to start going north, because they pretty much just had to give up their land or either be killed and burned down. So, you know,
I mean, that's the story of my family. When I think about my family, is part of the Great Migration. We all were in Louisiana and in Mississippi, and within a generation or two, everyone's in Detroit. Like everyone's working for Ford or Chrysler or for, you know, the automotive industry. But that was, and it wasn't always a result of violence. Sometimes it's just better opportunities in the North, and if you could get out, you could get out. But there is a massive migration of about 6 to 8 million Black people leave the South and migrate either to the North or to the West out to California. And it's because a large part of that is because of racial violence, because it was not safe to be Black in the South. To raise your children.
Always being threatened, the fact that you could lose everything, including your life. That threat And it's always, and it's still here in other ways. When we look
Yes.
at what's going on now with the Republican Party and how they are afraid to speak up, many of them know what's going on and that it's wrong, but they're afraid to speak up. They've been threatened with their life. In this day and time, you still have people
Yeah.
threatening people if they don't vote how they want them to vote, or if they want something done and you're not going to cooperate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's true.
that is something. There's
Mhm.
another documentary that I want to put out here too for you guys to look at when we talk about, and it is just being settled not too long ago. Several of them we've been hearing about being settled, but it's the one where they literally go in and take over these people's land from them, take them to court, and have them to sign papers giving their land to them so it could be
Mm,
legal. And when they would,
mm.
then they took them to jail because
Yeah.
the sheriff and the people in law, you could do that. You could say they were refusing to whatever and just make up a law
Comply.
and put them in jail. And they stayed in jail, I think, for 16 years before they actually got somebody to come back and help them get out. But I'm going to find the name of that too. It's called A
That
Road.
sounds like a fantastic documentary. And the story of land loss, I mean, is that's a whole nother discussion. But that's the only reason my great grandfather got land was because he had a good white friend that he trusted who
Hmm.
bought land and then sold that land to him.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's how Black people couldn't just outright buy land.
Hmm.
And you oftentimes put a target on your back when people knew what you had. And so the struggles that you see throughout the late 19th and early 20th and even mid 20th century is real. And you see it even in the 2008 housing crisis when Black people and Latinos are getting these predatory loans and, loans that they know banks know are going to balloon. They know that these people can't afford them. And yet they banked on being able to cash in on their misfortune.
Yeah, and we see it now, and it's still been done. It's just been done in different ways. But the key of
Yes.
it is the Voter Suppression Act and all those things that are being repealed and turned back around. It's all to set it up again where people can start doing this legally,
Yeah.
just on a different level. Same dance, just a different
Yeah.
beat. So I wanted to talk about that because. The name of that is Silver Dollar Road, Silver Dollar Lane or Silver Dollar Road is
I'll
the name
check
of
that
that
out.
document. Check that one out. It
On video.
Mhm.
on Video Prime Video. Yeah, it
Okay,
was.
great. Okay, great.
Yeah, check that one out too. It makes you cry, but that one
Mm,
tells you how they're still doing that, and this hadn't been that long ago.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. Okay, did anybody else have another point they wanted to? And in the people that are calling in too. Hi, Bertha Gray. Good to see you. If you all have any questions, hi, Etna. Etna says it was a very good documentary. She said she loved it. So people are texting in what they think about it. If you have a question or comment that you'd like for us to address, please do that as well. Okay. So let's talk. Okay, now we got the Reconstruction and the laws,
Mhm.
and I want to. You got to see it because it's just not enough time to go through all of it. But what other part after the Reconstruction uh, did we have the Jim Crow laws, and how do we?
Jim Crow. Right after Reconstruction, you get a major court case called Plessy versus Ferguson. And
Yes.
Plessy versus Ferguson is what allows for legal segregation everywhere, all throughout the South.
Right.
And it creates this sort of two-tiered caste system, if you will, where if you
Mhm.
are living in the South, you cannot vote. If you are Black living in the South, you cannot vote. You cannot have a lot of political say or social standing. You have to walk to the side if you see a white person walking down the street in front of you. This system of oppression and exploitation persists really for another 100 years. I mean, if you think about the fact that the Civil War ends in 1865 and you don't get another Voting Rights Act until 1965, so 100 years it takes for Black people to regain some of the political victories that they had 100 years previously.
Mhm.
Um, And I mean, that period, we are all familiar with the long freedom struggle and the civil rights movement and housing, and when it comes to like these racial contracts that where white people wouldn't sell their homes to black people. When you think about segregation, black kids can't go to school with white kids. Lynchings are still happening during this time. Mass incarceration is another aspect of this as well, just pretty much locking black people up. Black people at this time were 10% of the population of the United States, but 30% of the prison population. That makes no sense. And even now, you've seen that in a lot of ways where we have a lot of progress politically or symbolically. There's still a lot of regression. There's still a lot of continuity even as well, especially if you think about segregation. New York City is the most diverse we think of as diverse cities, but it's actually highly, highly segregated. You go into these schools, the elite schools have all of the white students or Asian students. The poor student schools have all of the black students and the Latino students.
Right.
I will say Houston does though stand out as one of those cities that is not hyper segregated. You do have a lot of.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because what is happening now in the state of Texas, as well as other places, that the political people that want to take us back are going in and taking over the school boards. And so we have a governor who is he's keeping our legislators and people coming back and back and back and saying, you will keep coming back to session until you agree to charter schools. And then once they get charter schools, then the white schools, they will have their people in their school, and the black people will be left with the leftovers. So they're trying to get back. So we do have it, but the fight. And so that kind of leads me before we kind of get to a close here. I want to talk about your new book that's coming out next year, but also I want to talk about what can we do? And I'm saying, what can we do, knowing that one of the things that I know we can do is inform our people and get them motivated to get up and vote, because that's how with Reconstruction, we got people in office. If you don't have people in office, and that's how Trump is getting the things done he wants. He put people in office to be able to back up what he wanted to do. And, so I don't know.
Voting is so important. I think the younger generation does not appreciate the political efficacy of voting and the power that comes with voting. It is not the solution, right? It's a part of a solution. I will say that. I do think that, when I look at this book that I have that's coming out, We Refuse, a forceful history of Black resistance, it looks at all the ways in which Black people have fought back, in which Black people basically refused the terms of their degradation, that said, no, we are not going to allow this to happen. And the book sort of breaks down into 5 chapters, which I think can be useful for people today. It looks at revolution and how revolutions have been successful. It looks at protection, how Black people have protected their communities and served as like a line of defense. It looks at flight, how Black people have left, like in the Great Migration, left the South to gone to better opportunities, or even returned to the South to come back to a lower cost of living or a better quality of life. It looks at force, how people have used even like guns and boycotts and strikes to protect against white supremacy. But the last chapter really looks at joy, and it's how Black people have used joy to just fight back and say, listen, joy is a weapon. You're not going to rob me of my humanity. You're not going to take this from me. And it's kind of funny, but I think the thing that encapsulates that the most is like, do you remember in Alabama earlier in the summer, the Montgomery Brawl, where the Black dock worker was, trying to tell these white people to move, and they hit him, and then it became this huge brawl, and you had a teenager swimming in the water to help him out, and then all of the memes and the gifts that came after that. I said, this is Black resistance on full display. This is We Refuse. It is Black people saying, we refuse to let you jump this Black man. We refuse to let you, engage in violence against us. And then also using humor with all of the gifts and the memes that came out to say, like, the joke's on you. The joke is on you. We will not
catch myself to keep from laughing, because it was sad, but it was like all of a sudden you said, yes, yes.
Yes, you were cheering.
You know, all those Karens and all those things that do those kind of things and lie and start things that, and then they can't finish it. So
Yeah.
I was kind of like,
That
whatever.
was like the highlight of 2023 for me.
It was. I watched several of the different. I have to admit, I did watch it, and I was really kind of behind the scene, like, yeah.
Yes,
Because,
but that sentiment is how all Black people felt. Very few people were like, "Oh, this is unfortunate."
Yeah, but you don't like it, and breaking rules. But for once, you just see so much of them with their knee on our neck, and us being oppressed and not being able to fight back. And for once, they got what they came in there and asked for. They got it.
Yep, but they sure did.
Listen, I can't wait to read your book and maybe interview you again about the book. And I know your mom and dad are having their big 50th this summer, but I was thinking maybe she could come for the women's conference and do a book signing there and talk about it. So we'll talk about that. We got to get you down to talk about that.
I would love to come back. I would love to do a book signing, whatever. Bring me back to Houston. I don't need a reason.
We're going to do that. And I just want to encourage you all to get this documentary, go and look at it and look at others. Cut out all this other Sex in the City and so-and-so's housewife and all that kind of junk. That at this time in our lives where the world is on fire abroad and everywhere else, but even in your own neighborhood, things are happening that you don't know. And while you're watching the comics and doing all these other things, our democracy is being stolen from us. And we have the votes to be able to keep it from being there, but we're not voting. We're not getting out and doing and compelling others to vote. We're not giving the money it takes. I mean, we just had an election in Cy-Fair, and the people they outspent us like crazy. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is up to run for mayor, the first Black woman, woman I think in the city of Houston, Black woman, and she has been outspent by millions of dollars. We just don't have that kind of money. And to be honest about it, we've got it, but we're not giving it to a campaign. We're going to put it on our backs or traveling or whatever. And so I think change of mind was going to be. So can you give us some, because we're kind of close to getting to the end. Can you give us some more like a close it out and talk about this documentary and why we should watch it and give us some words?
I think the greatest thing in trying to bring about change is to get information, is to get informed. You can't show up at the battlefield and you don't know what you're fighting for. You have to know what is at stake. And so for me, I always tell my students, read, watch, or listen. So if you can't read a book, I love a good book. If you can't read a book, then watch a good documentary. If you don't like documentaries, listen to a good podcast. There are so many different ways that you can engage in getting information by reading, watching, or listening. And then once you have gotten that information, just don't sit on it. Like you don't get it just like, oh, well, that was nice. Like you want that information to fuel you, to empower you. So to go out to your communities and connect with your family members and your friends, and you say, hey, like there's an important election coming up. How can we support this elected official? How can we come together? How can we either throw a party or a benefit for them? How can we raise awareness? How can we get this initiative on the ballot? Let's get signatures. Like this is in our DNA. This is what we do. This is what the long freedom struggle is about, the civil rights movement, even the abolitionist movement. Like we were born to champion for justice. And I think that is something that is God-given to all of us. I think we all have it in us to cheer for those who have been marginalized and suppressed. And I think that we do the Lord's work when we do that. And so you don't have to swallow the ocean, but you can go step by step in connecting people and even making these small steps. People think the presidential election matters, and it does, but it's these local ballot initiatives. It's the local, in your neighborhood, in your community votes that really have the greatest impact on your life. So that is what I'll say.
Oh, that is excellent. Excellent. What a wonderful, wonderful thought to close on too, and that's why I do what I do. I feel like social media is a platform that doesn't
Yes.
cost me money. I don't have to beg people to give me money to stay on the air or whatever. But I do exactly what you say. I don't have time to read a lot, so I listen, I watch, I look at
Yeah.
documentaries, and
Yeah.
then after I do that, I share it. I start
Yeah.
telling everybody about it. I put it on Talk. So I'm going to ask each of you all that are watching today, could y'all please share this particular show, Talk show, with all of your friends, all of your families. Put it on your Facebook page. Share it to your friends on Facebook, because this is the way we get the word out there that, hey, there's
Yeah.
something that you need to know. And if you can't read, if you don't like to read, don't worry about it. Go to Netflix and go to that documentary. Here is the title of it. And then ask them to share it and share it and share it. And then compel them to come on and let's get together and let's vote. Let's go to the polls and let's put some money behind what it is we're doing. So that's what Tea Talk is really all about. We're trying to share information that, and it's not all political, but it's a lot of things, even from cooking to childcare, whatever you need. That's what Tea Talk is about. So I am so happy that you came today, Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson. You are just such a champion in my heart. For all you do, keep learning and listening, keep bringing it back to us. And we're going to see about getting you down here for that new book that you're writing. And we'll look for you, and definitely go by and see this new documentary. It's on Netflix. It's called Stamped from the Beginning. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. But once you learn about it, get your whole family to watch it, because we've got to educate ourselves, because there's something that people are planning for us, and it's not going to be nice. And if we don't know the plan, we're going to look up one day and it'll be too late to make the change. So our forefathers have fought and died for it. Let's don't go back. So we have to fight and die for it. Let's continue to move forward with the things that we can do, so we don't go backwards and we don't let people take us backwards. Well, that's all for now. Listen, wasn't it a wonderful show? Go share with someone else. And I'm Lady O. So join me next week at 3 for tea with Lady O. Bye-bye for now.